Secret of Mana, an undeniable classic, an action-packed juggernaut for Squaresoft and the SNES. Everyone loves Secret of Mana, that's an objective statement. So it really grinds my gears that Square did everything in their power to destroy the franchise. And let me elaborate on that before you rip my balls off in the comment section. I love the Mana franchise. I've been infatuated by its unique art style since I was 2 feet tall in 4th grade. The Mana series, in my eyes, is defined by two things, being action RPGs when every other franchise was afraid to do so, and just how gorgeous absolutely everything is. The art style, the animations, the music. Unlike Final Fantasy and the increasingly bleak worlds we received as the games went on, Mana games consistently place you in beautiful picture book fantasy worlds that just envelop me with warm feelings. The Mana franchise started strong, but Square's failings began when they made the choice not to localize Seiken Densetsu 3, the third mainline title. This is considered one of the best retro RPGs ever made, and we were shirked of that experience for over 2 decades. Because the franchise wasn't making $10 trillion per game, Square felt as if we needed a big multi-game project that would widen the franchise's umbrella and pull in a bunch of new fans. What we got was a tactical spin-off that was barely a Mana title, a mediocre dungeon crawler that I kinda love, and a mainline title that failed to live up to the greats. The series was delegated to cheap remakes for a while, but things started to turn around with 2 releases in 2 years. In 2019, we saw the Collection of Mana bringing back the first 3 titles for new audiences, and in 2020, we got a full remake of Seiken Densetsu 3, now renamed to Trials of Mana. The game did pretty good, and it also cost $7 to make. The series has begun to gain traction once again, with an anime, mobile release, and a new mainline title in the works. Good lord, it's enough to give a man a stroke. People will always hold the series' heights as legends of the genre, but nobody ever seems to talk about the first title in the franchise. For good reason. Despite what this title screen may want you to think, this is not a Final Fantasy game. Kind of. What we have here is Seiken Densetsu, also known as Final Fantasy Gaiden, also known as Final Fantasy Adventure, also known as Mystic Quest. Despite technically starting out as a Final Fantasy spin-off, this franchise almost immediately distanced itself and turned into its own thing. So for all intents and purposes, this is the first Mana game. So what we actually have here is a Game Boy action RPG, 3 words that when put together, trigger my fight or flight. Think Secret of Mana, if everything was Pantone 448C. Terrible, I mean. This is, and I cannot stress it enough, an unseasoned chicken of a video game. What's the best thing that represents the Mana franchise at large? Action gameplay. It's what set the games apart from the rest of the JRPG guff. But I find it so incredibly questionable that they thought it was a good idea to do it first on the Game fucking Boy. Final Fantasy Adventure stars Sumo, a young man who is forced to fight in a coliseum for the Dark Lord's entertainment. His friend dies from injuries and will never be mentioned again. This game's translation is hilariously awful. Tree of Mana grows with the energy of will from each and everything of this world. Willy! Ham. Mana is in danger now. Tree of Mana is watching us from above the clouds. It's protecting us from evil things. You care to elaborate on that? Looks like you've been a bit stronger. I'm sorry, Amanda, but I had to. Can't carry! Mystic Tune? Yeah, you escape from the castle quite easily actually, but then you get caught and thrown down a waterfall. You meet a girl who is being attacked by monsters and you save her with haste. Her brother, not so much. You take her to a dude living under the big waterfall you just fell down, and you're told that the Dark Lord is trying to harness the energy of the Mana Tree, which resides above the castle that you just escaped from. This happened once in the past, and it was this mysterious girl's mother who saved everyone by rallying the legendary Gemma Knights and thwarting the evil once and for all. Except they clearly didn't. Wow. Plot convenience. Holy shit. You and the girl set out to stop the Dark Lord, protect the Mana Tree, and by extension, save the world. And nothing past that is really worth mentioning. The restrictive translation doesn't leave room for any personality or meaningful interactions between the cast of characters. This means that the multitude of companion characters are only defined by their one attack or function, most of which are kinda useless. Speaking of that, gameplay here is understandably simplistic, but holy shit is it next level unintuitive. It's been a real long time since I played played a retro game that feels this clunky. You know how the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance Zelda games have 2 action buttons and every item, including your sword, can be swapped in and out? That way, if you need multiple items for a puzzle or just don't feel like using your sword, you can do that. This is absolutely the best way to go about a control scheme with an action RPG that's limited to 2 buttons. Final Fantasy Adventure does not do this. You have an attack button and a universal button 2. Any item or spell is assigned to that second button, and this results in a disgusting amount of menuing. I get that the Zelda games hadn't come out at this point, but I don't excuse anything ever. If I did, I wouldn't hate staples so much. The actual combat consists of you slamming the attack button and or tossing out a spell to varying degrees of success. Most weapons come with some sort of utility as well. Axes cut down trees, flails cut down foliage, chains break the laws of physics. Swords don't do anything for some reason. Most of these function, though the axe-type weapons are notably awful for combat, making me question why they're here. Because different weapons are required for different scenarios, you're constantly going to be jumping back and forth between really clunky menus to swap them in and out, making exploration and late-game combat more a chore than anything else. More of a minor nitpick here, but why is it that when I have a key, I have to have it equipped to get through the door? Can't the game just tell I have one and open it for me? This does lead me to a larger problem I have with this game though, and that's the 2 exploration items, Maddox and Keys. Maddox break rocks and will open hidden paths, while Keys open doors. However, they're both breakable, so if for whatever reason you don't happen to have enough Keys or Maddox during a dungeon, fuck you, I guess. The Maddox problem is solved eventually when you get a permanent one, but the key problem, it's just a weird design choice, especially when you have such a limited inventory space. Most games do their best to ensure that once you're in a dungeon, you're not going to have to leave to get items for progression. Not this one. It's just a massive inconvenience that doesn't add anything to the game. Dungeons are very samey, most are visually identical and incredibly similar in design. This, along with many of my other complaints, are just simply byproducts of this being a Game Boy action RPG. I get that, but that's exactly why I find this game so interesting. Why? Just why? Maybe they wanted to see what they could do with the hardware, and if that's the case, I can commend the fact that this game exists. However, it's also not what I would call a stable experience. I can accept quite a lot of technical jank, but I don't know if it's the game or the fact that I'm deeply schizophrenic, but I think I'm going crazy. I'll load into new zones and get stuck in walls. NPCs will spawn in deeply bizarre places. Your AI companions have no tracking or even a hint of a brain. Monsters can pass through obstacles to hit you, but sometimes they can't. There's very little visual indication that an attack has landed, so it can be really hard to tell when you've dealt damage with the sound off. And trust me, you're gonna want the sound off with this game. And even then, sometimes the monsters will just fly at me for no reason when an attack does land. There were a lot of cases where it felt as if the game was barely holding itself together. The wonky hit detection, the sprite flickering, it's a technical mess. Then when it works, it's still way more jank than its competitors. It feels like the devs stapled the game together. God damn it! Let's cut the bullshit though. Nobody's going to be playing this game for a deep and mechanically sound experience. You're going to play it because you're curious about the first Mana game. A lot of these problems don't really matter that much when put into this perspective, especially since this game is easy enough that precision is almost never necessary. There are a couple things that this game does that I actually really like. There's a charge attack bar that when full allows you to pull up a special power move that is unique to each weapon type. This creates at least a little bit of a metagame, which I was very thankful for. Most enemies go down in 1 or 2 hits. The most you're gonna have to think about is whether or not magic is necessary to damage them. The bosses, on the other hand, aren't exactly what I'd call Shakespearean when it comes to their intricacy, though this game does love to needlessly kill characters. Most bosses do nothing more than move on a designated path and occasionally shoot a projectile at you. However, your range of movement varies drastically, so different weapons are going to work better for different bosses. I am tired and no longer want to talk about the gameplay. Surprisingly, this game pulls off a fake-out ending, and I love when games do stupid shit like that. I really did think that Glaive Castle was gonna be the final dungeon. Looking back, I was stupid for thinking that, but hey, I am schizo, so you know. I feel like the game would have been better if it had ended at Glaive Castle, though. It was built up as a climax, and I felt as if I had seen everything the game had to show. I was correct. The second act opens up, like, slightly, as in you get a robot chicken, but the gameplay heavily stagnates. The dungeons don't change, no more weapon types are introduced, there are very few unique companions to work with. By that I mean 1. You do get an atomic bomb though, That's pretty cool. It should have wrapped up before it overstayed its welcome, but as it stands, the game drags to a conclusion. The actual ending is interesting in the sense that it sets up perfectly for a sequel. The terms on which the world is saved are very shaky, so any sort of conflict could shoot the world into an unending downfall. I have no idea if they follow up on this though. By today's standards, it's such an interesting game to look at because it tries so much, but you feel the game constantly stressing under the weight of its console's restrictions. Luckily for people who like fun, they moved to the home console scene for the sequel, which hopefully won't kill me quite as fast. While this game definitely has its retro charms, it was also one of the most miserable experiences I've had in a long time. It's only around 10 hours long, but it feels as if my loveless children should be fighting over my will. At least my morbid curiosity has been sated. For now. I can say without a shred of doubt in my mind that this is indeed one of the games I have ever played. The JRPG ever, if you will. Man, I was really hoping when I made a video on this game I wasn't gonna absolutely hate it, but I hate this game. You need to... Man, if I could piss on this game, I'd do it.